Chapter 28. Today, we choose chaos. In the first few episodes of this season, we dove into some pretty hard-hitting topics. Toxic managers, toxic workplaces, and the effects it has on the human psyche. We all want to believe that there is good inside everyone, sometimes buried a little deeper than we like, but still there. And as much as I hate to break it to you, some people just aren't good. And in the previous episode, Dr. Kimberly Jones stated that maybe these people have some type of past trauma that drives them to be the way they are, but still, that isn't an excuse to be a horrible person. But today, I want to pivot slightly, because some people don't necessarily experience toxic managers, and I want to give voice to those people. And you may be asking yourself, what does that mean? It means sometimes the actual workplace is toxic, not just the manager. Or maybe the manager isn't toxic at all. Are their actions or lack thereof contributory? Well, we'll attempt to answer that question. But some people get up in the morning, show up to work by 8 a.m., and by 9 a.m., they are already drained. Drained because they go into work and might as well be going to the front lines of the beaches of Normandy. Toxic workplaces can look like a lot of different things, and most people write it off as normal. They actually believe that because it's called work, it isn't supposed to be easy. Stress in the workplace is one of those dangerous things, and depending on the type of job you have, it can literally be life or death. From the Hyman brand, I'm JD Hyman. As a black man living here in America, I am living proof that while all men were created equal, not all men are equal. We're here to dig into the American political system, explore and unearth experiences from the human condition, and be a catalyst for some hard conversations that need to be had. No matter what brought you here, I'm glad you came. Once again, my name is JD, and this is the Hyman Podcast. Part 1. An Ode to the War Room. For the most part, we all know what it's like to work in a toxic environment. We know this because we've all worked someplace where the people are ultra competitive, or we have a team member who does the bare minimum, or it's one of those situations where people are always quitting and we inherit the extra work, or it's a situation where management has their favorites and it's you and I against the world. As many of us come face to face with the ghosts of our past or even our present, sometimes the most unfathomable thing can be true. Most of the time when we're dealing with a toxic manager, we are left in the dark as to why that seems to be the case. But what if we know the reason? And what if the reason is the most insane thing? What if the reason was the product of, say, a lover's quarrel?
A group of the employees said to me, look, we got to talk to you, but the HR director who was there with me can't be present. So we find this conference room, I'm sitting down talking to them, and they said, here's what's going on. The HR director is having a sexual relationship with the sales manager, and the executive director is having a sexual relationship with the sales manager also. Now, the HR director, he was actively telling people, if you rat me out, I'm going to have you fired.
That was Jason Greer. Jason is the founder and president of Greer Consulting Inc., or GCI, a labor management and employee relations consulting firm located in St. Louis, Missouri. Jason is the go-to labor and diversity expert, a trusted source in the latest race and labor relations news for media across the country, where he provides insight into breaking stories such as George Floyd, racial protests, diversity issues in the workplace, and more for various news and media outlets, including Forbes, The Wall Street Journal, CNN, MSNBC, The New York Times, The Los Angeles Times, ABC, CBS, Fox News, iHeartMedia Network, SiriusXM, and Inc. magazine. Jason is widely known for his work in the area of racial reconciliation based upon his experiences as a victim of cross burnings and racial harassment in 1991 by the Knights of Ku Klux Klan. This story and the resulting lessons have been given new perspective in his keynote, Diversity in the Brain, What's Your Story?, wherein he champions and celebrates diversity as a means of overcoming barriers to success and experiencing the best that an organization and or community has to offer. In addition to his work as a national labor and diversity expert, Jason has authored several books which have ranked as #1 bestsellers both domestically and internationally. Jason was named on the top entrepreneurs to watch in 2020 by Thrive Global. His podcast, The Employee Whisperer, was recognized under the prestigious New and Noteworthy as one of the top podcasts on Apple Music. Jason previously served as a board agent with the National Labor Relations Board, where he managed a private sector labor relations issues and worked to improve the labor petition filing process. As a labor and diversity expert, Jason has assisted large and small businesses in industries such as hospitals, assisted living facilities, manufacturing, and high-tech companies. His personable approach has made him one of the most sought-after labor and employee relations consultants in the United States. Jason holds a baccalaureate degree in social work and social psychology, master's degrees in social work and human resources and industrial relations, as well as advanced certifications in business administration and human resources education, making him, without question, a thought leader and expert on the subject. By and large, most people want to do the right thing, but in the grand scheme of things, most of the time, we don't want to rock the boat. At the core of it all, it's usually fear that keeps people from doing the right thing. How many times have people covered up crimes or obfuscated evidence or obstructed justice because they were scared of what the authorities might think? Or how many times have people encountered the police only to attempt to run away because they were afraid of certain outcome? As much as it's preached that justice will prevail, so few people actually have faith in that broken system, and with good reason. But when it comes to work, that should never be the case.
They wanted to say something to corporate, but the person who was in charge of giving them the engagement surveys was the HR director. And he was actively watching them as they were typing in their answers.
In Jason's case, he was juggling a Goliath of a situation. A delicate balancing act between good and evil that was certain to leave scars. But in the act of balancing competing priorities, he had to reckon with what true equilibrium was and how, in the long run, it would affect the managers and the employees and the company as a whole.
I had to walk this tightrope between dealing with the HR director, dealing with the sales manager, who also propositioned me for sex when she found out that I knew, as well as the executive director. And I had to keep them from fighting each other because the executive director was ready to go to battle with the HR director. I had to deal with the flirtation / come back to my apartment that I was getting from the sales manager, while also having to deal with the employees who had been scared to death to say anything for the better part of a year. And understand this, I still hadn't been paid yet. So I have to protect myself because they haven't processed my invoice, but I'm also having to protect myself because of all the legalities that were going on in this situation. So when I think of a toxic work environment, toxic conversations, plural, because they were happening all over the board.
When it comes to people we know and trust, we have to always consider the human factor. As I mentioned in season 3's finale, the human factor plays a big role in just about everything. Work is no different. Sometimes we have to reconcile the fact that the people we trust the most will at some point let us down.
The worst thing in the world is when you find out that somebody that you really like kind of sucks.
And once you do that, once you come to the realization, you can actually move on and make meaningful change. Our lives are usually built around a series of premises that were predetermined a long time ago. And many of those predeterminations stood the test of time, and a lot of them did not. We have a responsibility to ourselves to be the best versions of ourselves, not just for our sake, but for the sake of the people we encounter on a daily basis. It's a call to arms in a way, in a very matter-of-fact way. The toxicity we see in the workplace is usually born of things that we can absolutely control. In the context of historical jurisprudence, we are the arbiters of our own fate. We alone decide the path we take, and should that path lead us down the road of self-destruction, we can only blame ourselves because we were the architects. We made it happen. We set the stage, and as long as the costume fits, we play our parts. Life doesn't happen in a vacuum. It happens out loud and usually in public. We build these house of cards, and when the cards come tumbling down, we do the only thing we know how. We blame and obfuscate and obstruct. And sometimes that's done subtly, and sometimes it's point blank.
They've basically been running a campaign of fear because the executive director would tell the employees, if you say anything to corporate, I'm going to get you fired. The HR director is saying, if you say anything to corporate, I'm going to get you fired. And the sales director is saying, I'm Teflon. You can't touch me even if you do say something, because I'm turning states on the general manager or the executive director, and I'm turning states on the HR director.
And what this teaches us is that people, for however flawed they are, will usually not stop once they hit rock bottom. Because as we learned with Alex Murdoch, his rock bottom had a basement, and in that basement there was a fissure. And in that fissure was a chasm that was as deep as the horizon is long. More on all of this after the break. Part 2, the dusty residue of flaming hot Cheetos. The most toxic manager I've ever had was the hospital administrator I've mentioned throughout this season. And she was toxic in numerous ways, but something she said to me at one point stuck with me for a long time. We were talking about the executive level staff and how it was important to rely on their expertise since we were expecting and preparing for an accreditation audit. Well, maybe I was just being optimistic. At one point in the conversation, I said, "You just have to trust the team." And she responded, "I don't trust anyone." It was all too matter of fact. And I believed her. The thing is, she condoned a culture of mediocrity. People were praised and rewarded for not doing their job. So how can you even learn to trust people when you let them all but get away with murder? The facility handyman was allowed to ignore sometimes critical work orders or work orders from people he didn't like. The nursing staff didn't take patient vitals or perform regular checks. And then if there was ever a major incident, it was chaos and a bunch of finger pointing. The kitchen staff were serving lunch when McDonald's was still serving breakfast. And all the while, when it came to the actual number of available beds in the facility, she was lying to the United States Marshal Service and other state agencies and was cramming patients in rooms like sardines, her words, not mine, in an effort to beat the monthly budget. And it's behavior like this that people like to ignore because the truth is irrelevant when it comes to money. But every once in a while, not always, but every once in a while, you find yourself dealing with someone, a VP or a member of the C-suite who actually cares and who wants to do something about it to effectively change the status quo, as was in Jason's case.
We called the corporate vice president because she asked what happened. The corporate vice president that I'm sitting with says to her, "Jennifer, I need to break some news to you." And she goes, "Okay, what? What's going on?" He explains the situation, and I will never forget this to the day I die. She literally screams, "What?" And she drops the phone. You hear her scrambling to pick up the phone. She goes, "Jason, tell me this isn't true." And I was like, it is true because I'm the one that's breaking the story.
And when you actually take measures to change things and improve the lives of your workforce, you actually build a loyalty and strengthen that workforce. It's almost definitely the ideal situation we would all like to find ourselves in. Isn't that what people deserve? After all, these people that give their lives to you, wouldn't you want to take care of them?
You have to show the employees that you're taking their feedback serious. You also have to break up this culture of fear.
At the end of the day, managers and executives have a responsibility to their workforce. As a manager myself, I take that role very seriously. Being responsible for someone's livelihood, someone's ability to pay their bills, and their ability to live the life they seek to live is a huge undertaking, and it's one that should never be taken lightly. When I made the decision to quit my job, one thing that consumed my thoughts was the idea that I was leaving my team in the hands of someone who didn't value them in the same way that I did. I never treated people as if they were commodities or a means to an end. I never made people feel like their job wasn't important or appreciated.
What hurt me the most was seeing how hurt the employees were. This employer was the best paying employer in the area for the work that they did. So this was not the kind of job that they could just walk away from. So it was almost, I talk about the golden handcuffs. The golden handcuffs, for folks who don't know, the golden handcuffs look like this. If I hire you, and I believe in the golden handcuff theory, it's I'm going to pay you better than the market will pay you. But in addition to paying you better than the market would pay you anywhere else, I'm going to treat you like garbage. You are essentially handcuffed and you can't go anywhere because your family's dependent upon that money. And that was the situation that these employees found themselves in. Another heartbreaking thing is this community was such an outlier from the other communities that this company owned because the company, for the most part, believed in taking care of their employees, taking care of their managers, taking care of their residents. It was a company founded on love. And you had this one outlier in this community where these folks came in, they're making more money than they make anywhere else. And they heard all these great things in terms of the community reputation about this facility. But then they discovered that once they got in, they weren't able to go anywhere else. And they were stuck.
One thing my previous manager taught me was that when I came into the office each morning, to go through and talk to everyone on the team, greet them, take notice of their day, see if they need support, show them how much you care. And so that's what I did. Every morning before I sat at my desk, I went to greet my team. And it wasn't something I did out of obligation. I did it because I cared. I always wanted the best for them, even if that meant seeing them go somewhere else. I never wanted anyone on my team to feel beholden to me. I wanted them to grow their skills and to go off and to be their best, no matter what.
I've seen people cry because someone's loved one passed away, and the department, they loved each other so much that when that person's husband passed away, it was like everybody lost a loved one. I've seen fights erupt, physical fist fights. I've seen arguments happen. I've seen strikes. I've seen walkouts. I've seen lockouts. I've seen it all. That's what makes the world of work so fascinating to me, is because there is human beings in every single industry, every single company across the board. And human beings are not exact. Human beings are different. Human beings are chaotic. Human beings are wonderful. Human beings are peaceful. Human beings can be hateful. That's the human experience in the world.
Managers have the unique ability to see the best and worst in people. They have the ability to be great forces of influence, and that influence can flow either way. One thing we can be certain of is that people are inherently flawed. I am flawed, but I'm also not too afraid to admit it. I think the most dangerous people are the ones that are A, afraid to admit their flaws, or B, and probably worse, the ones who don't think they have any flaws. Yes, we all have the potential for greatness, and for managers, that means holding ourselves to a higher standard in every way that matters. Sure, management is tough, but so are we, and nobody at any age, even if you're in your mid-50s, is above seeking help when it's needed. And if you wake up each day choosing chaos, you'll find yourself surrounded by it. Life has a way of reflecting back what we put into it. It's basic math. But here's the thing. Math might be hard, life is undeniably short. A Monday is always around the corner ready to hit the reset button. This is the choice that you made, the path you chose, and like anything involving people, it will always be messy, unpredictable, and full of highs and lows. But if you're willing to do the work, to embrace growth, to inspire rather than stifle, to build rather than break, to lift up rather than tear down, then you can be part of the solution rather than the cycle. So the question is, what will you choose tomorrow? My name is JD Hyman. This is the Hyman Podcast. I'll see you next time.